Welcome to The Explainer, folks. Today, we're diving into one of the absolute most fascinating business narratives of our time, the Jeff Bezos success story, from Wall Street to a massive e-commerce empire. We're going to take an incredible journey today, exploring a story that's completely defined by massive risk, unparalleled vision, and just this relentless drive for business evolution. I'm honestly so excited to guide you through exactly how one simple idea managed to transform the entire global marketplace. So I want you to think about this ultimate what-if scenario. What if leaving a highly secure, incredibly high-paying Wall Street job just to go sell books online eventually made you one of the richest people in human history? You know, most traditional corporate stories follow a really predictable, safe path. You climb the ladder, you secure your position, and you stay there. But this story, it completely bypasses all that logic. It really requires us to understand a level of risk tolerance that is, frankly, kind of hard to fathom for most of us. And that brings us right to the core of our explainer today. We've got a few big questions to tackle. Why exactly did Jeff Bezos leave such a secure career? Why did almost everyone looking from the outside in expect Amazon to be a total failure? And probably most importantly, how did a tiny online bookstore navigate all of that doubt to become one of the world's biggest companies? Let's get into it. Section 1. The Foundation, from Science to Wall Street. Okay, so Bezos' intense drive, it started really early. His childhood was basically entirely characterized by this deep-seated passion for science and technology. He wasn't just playing with regular toys, he was actively exploring how things worked. He even famously built a solar cooker out of an umbrella as a kid just to test out his scientific theories. That natural curiosity eventually paved the way to his education at Princeton, where he built up the technical chops he needed to understand emerging technologies. And eventually, that landed him an absolute dream job on Wall Street at D.E. Shaw. We're talking rapid career growth, super comfortable salary. By all conventional metrics, he had made it. Section 2. The Catalyst. Discovering the Internet. Right, so it's the mid-1990s, and Bezos comes across this staggering data point. Internet usage was growing at 2,300% a year. Just think about that number for a second. It wasn't just a gradual uptick, it was practically a vertical line. Seeing this explosive, rapid growth, well, it inspired him to take a massive leap of faith. He saw a window of opportunity that was opening at literal lightning speed, and he knew he had to act right then, before it closed. Section 3. The Leap, the Birth of Amazon. And guys, he actually does it. He walks away from the money, he walks away from the security of Wall Street entirely. Next thing you know, he packs up and heads west, literally writing his business plan from the passenger seat of a car while his wife Mackenzie drove them across the United States. They eventually set up shop in a humble garage, as grassroots as it gets, and they made the highly calculated choice to sell books as their very first product. But why books, right? Of all the things you could sell on the new frontier of the internet, why that? Well, strategically, books were the perfect wedge. Think about the logic here. They're easy to package, they're really hard to break during shipping, and most importantly, there are literally more items in the book category than in any other category of commerce. No physical bookstore could possibly hold every single book in print, but an online store, it absolutely could. It was just a brilliant way to crack open the door of e-commerce. Section 4. The Crucible, Surviving the Early Years. Now, survival was absolutely not guaranteed. At all. Those early years were completely defined by staggering financial losses as they just bled money trying to scale up. Investors were incredibly skeptical. Add to that the grueling reality of Bezos and his tiny team packing book orders on their hands and knees late into the night, just trying desperately to keep up with demand. And then the dot-com bubble bursts, wiping out countless other internet startups all around them. The pressure must have been unimaginable. So how did Amazon survive when so many others didn't? It really came down to a massive clash of philosophies. Typical business thinking at the time demanded short-term profits. Investors wanted their money and they wanted it immediately. But Bezos, he had this unyielding focus on long-term growth and building customer trust. He consistently chose to reinvest pretty much every single penny back into the company to improve the customer experience, entirely ignoring that intense outside pressure for immediate short-term profits. Section 5. The Expansion, Amazon's big breakthrough. That relentless, long-term focus, it eventually created an unstoppable snowball effect. They didn't just stay a bookstore for long. They rapidly expanded beyond books, pushing into electronics and then clothing. Next came a massive paradigm shift. They invited third-party marketplace sellers onto their platform. That completely turned them into a destination for almost anything you could think of. Finally, they rolled out Prime membership, which was a true game changer. It fundamentally changed consumer expectations around shipping speed, and it locked in absolute customer loyalty. Because of these strategic expansions, Amazon was no longer just an online bookstore. It officially became the everything store. That initial garage vision had been completely realized, and they completely redefined the company's identity in the eyes of the world. But actually, scratch that. The story was really just beginning. Section 6. The cliffhanger. What's next? See, this empire goes so much further. In part 2 of this explainer, we are going to cover some massive upcoming milestones. We'll explore the creation of Amazon Web Services, or AWS, which literally powers a huge chunk of the modern internet as we know it today. We'll also look at his aerospace company, Blue Origin, and we'll dive really deep into Jeff Bezos' specific leadership style and the biggest business lessons that ultimately made him one of the richest people alive. For now, I want to leave you with a final provocative thought. What happens when a small online bookstore born in a 1990s garage starts building rockets and powering the very infrastructure of the internet? It completely redefines what is possible in business. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I know you're going to be eager for our next installment to find out what happens next. See you then. All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Picture this. It's 1994, and Jeff Bezos launches this, well, just a simple online bookstore. But fast forward to 2018, that exact same company completely shattered the ceiling, crossing into $1 trillion global powerhouse. I mean, it's a wild story of relentless ambition, highly calculated risk, and just absolute massive scale. So today we're going to unpack the specific blueprint behind this empire and really look under the hood at the mechanisms that made it all possible. Here's our blueprint for today. We're going to cover the $1 trillion transition, powering the modern internet, the day one philosophy, navigating massive challenges, expanding beyond retail, and wrap it all up with lessons for lasting success. Let's get into it. Starting with Section 1, the $1 trillion transition. So, in its earliest days, Amazon was this super humble operation, literally run out of a garage. It was singularly focused on selling books over what was back then a brand new internet. Fun fact, Jeff Bezos was actually driving packages to the post office himself in his Chevy Blazer. Right? But obviously, fast forward and it's transformed into a global technological juggernaut. And what's crucial to understand here is that this wasn't just some gradual, slow growth. No, it was a fundamental reinvention of what a company could even be. They completely redefined global logistics, data analytics, and honestly, our own consumer expectations on a planetary scale. Moving on to Section 2, powering the modern internet. Now, to truly understand Amazon Web Services, or AWS, we first got to define cloud computing. Before the cloud, if a company wanted to run a website or an app, they literally had to buy, power, and cool these massive rooms just packed full of physical servers. It was incredibly expensive and clunky. Cloud computing changed the game. It lets companies simply rent that computer power, server space, and data storage right over the internet. You just use what you need and you pay for what you use. It completely removed this massive financial barrier to entry for, well, countless tech startups. There's actually a super fascinating contrast at the heart of this whole empire. On one hand, you have Amazon Retail, the highly visible storefront where we all buy everything from like socks to electronics. But then, operating quietly behind the scenes is AWS. This unseen infrastructure is actually Amazon's most profitable business. It brings in a massive portion of their overall operating income. I mean, it is the absolute backbone that companies all over the world depend on to run their operations, stream their movies, and serve their own customers. Honestly, without AWS, the modern internet as we know it today simply wouldn't function. Okay, Section 3, the Day One philosophy. So Bezos' core leadership philosophy wasn't just talk. It was engineered directly into the company's daily operations. First up, customer obsession over competitor focus. They don't just, casually watch the other guy, they obsessively invent on behalf of the customer. Next is unwavering long-term thinking and relentless constant innovation. And here is a big one, widespread experimentation, which means accepting failure as a totally necessary step forward. For example, remember the spectacular failure of the Fire Phone? Well, it wasn't viewed internally as a total disaster. Instead, they treated it as incredibly valuable data that basically paved the way for massive hardware successes later on, like the Amazon Echo. All of those tenets really just roll up into one single concept, which was first outlined in Bezos' famous 1997 shareholder letter, the Day One mindset.
This basically means treating every single day with the urgency, the hunger, and the agility of a startup's very first day. Bezos strongly believed that the moment a company acts like it has arrived, what he calls day two, that's when complacency sets in, followed by irrelevance, and eventually, a slow decline. So this day one mindset, it's basically their ultimate defense mechanism against becoming obsolete.
Which brings us to Section 4, navigating massive challenges.
Look, scaling to $1 trillion naturally invites some pretty monumental stress tests, right? Internally, the company has had to navigate intense worker criticism regarding warehouse conditions, along with some pretty massive leadership changes, like, Bezos himself stepping down as CEO. And externally, it's just as intense. They face fierce global competition, increasing government regulations and scrutiny, and this relentless market pressure from investors to just continuously perform. Operating at this global scale means the leadership team has to constantly adapt their strategies just to keep the machine moving forward through all these storms.
All right, Section 5, expanding beyond retail.
Now, Bezos's vision extends way, way beyond the logistics of retail e-commerce. While Amazon definitely established terrestrial dominance, meaning an absolute mastery of e-commerce and cloud logistics right here on Earth, Bezos also fixed his sights on a cosmic horizon. By founding Blue Origin, a company fully dedicated to space exploration, he manifested his ultimate investment in long-term future innovation. See, he believes that humanity's next massive leap actually requires moving heavy industry out into space in order to preserve Earth. So this space endeavor isn't just a side hobby, it's a core pillar of his philosophy.
Finally, Section 6, lessons for lasting success.
So what does this all mean for us? If you want to apply this massive blueprint to your own entrepreneurial endeavors, there's a really clear progression you can follow. Step 1, focus strictly on customers. Literally let their needs completely dictate your product roadmaps. Step 2, don't be afraid to take bold, calculated risks on untested ideas. Step 3, keep learning continuously because you have to survive in a constantly shifting tech landscape. And step 4, build systems instead of shortcuts. Sure, doing things the right way takes longer, but it's absolutely the only way to build from massive scale rather than just, chasing those quick, unsustainable wins.
Ultimately, whatever your opinion, Jeff Bezos' legacy is pretty undeniable. He didn't just build a successful company. His efforts fundamentally shifted how the entire world shops. And AWS, it completely transformed global technology infrastructure as we know it. He's influenced a whole new generation of entrepreneurship by proving that data and scale can overcome almost any obstacle, and in the process, reshaped the baseline standards of global business.
But here is the kicker. This requires decades of patience. I mean, this massive success absolutely did not happen overnight. It wasn't some viral flash in the pan. It was the direct result of decades of extreme patience and relentless innovation. It meant sticking to a long-term vision even when, early on, critics were loudly claiming the business model was completely doomed to fail.
So I want to leave you with a final, slightly provocative question to reflect on for your own projects. Are you willing to embrace calculated risks and build lasting value? Or are you just chasing quick shortcuts? Because true empire building, that requires you to think long-term and just completely obsess over the value you deliver. Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer today, and I really hope this blueprint helps you build something incredible.